Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is now 11 a.m. We have a great show for you today. You know, when you start thinking about retirement and it comes down to the time that you turn off your paycheck, you might turn on Social Security or your pension, you have to start making health care decisions like Medicare. It can be very, very scary. Our guest today, Nahum Daniels, he is an RICP. He has written the book Retire Reset, that which just published this month. What you need to know and your financial advisor may not be telling you. With this, we're going to do really kind of a deep dive into the topic of retirement and what things we need to have on our radar. With that, we always do reserve just the first few moments of the show to tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Houston area and the Gulf Coast region when it comes to financial literacy. So we did set off this week Houston Money Week. I know if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me talk about Houston Money Week many, many times, but we are starting Houston Money Week 2019. And so we did have, actually yesterday, we had our partner meeting, partners, different organizations that are involved with Houston Money Week. And Houston Money Week is a community-wide financial education initiative that empowers families and individuals to be successful in making financial choices. At the end of the day, we offer financial education classes that are free. And there may be some that happen near you in your neighborhood, but they are citywide. We've even gotten so big now that there are classes that take place outside of Houston, so Huntsville, Conroe, that in that area as well. Such a large organization. We are now year 11. And so it's just great to see the initiative grow each and every year. For organizations that want to become involved, I would encourage you to go to HoustonMoneyWeek.org. We do still have the calendar from last year on there, but it will be being updated very shortly as we are starting getting it ramped up and planning for Houston Money Week 2019. So it's actually a really, really good time. I have people ask me, well, how can I help? How can we become involved? So many different ways. If you are a presenter, someone who is an educator who is in the space, financial literacy, we're always looking for speakers. But if you are an employer or somebody who has a space that would like to host an event during April, during Financial Literacy Month in 2019, that is a way that you can can help Houston Money Week as well. So for step one, I would send you to that website, HoustonMoneyWeek.org. Get on the newsletter. You'll receive emails of different events that we have going on throughout the city. We'll encourage you to come out to our monthly meetings up until April of 2019, where Houston Money Week takes place. With that, let's go ahead and get Nahum on the line here. Nahum, are you there?
Yes, I am, Chris. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, I always kind of start the show the same way. I'll usually share your bio with the listeners so that they can get to know you a little bit better. Now, you are a CFP, a Certified Financial Planner. You're also a Retirement Income Certified Professional, RICP. You're based in Stamford, Connecticut, and you've specialized for over 30 years in serving clients facing the challenge of making income last in retirement and wealth span generations. Once again, thank you for being on the show.
Again, it's my honor.
Well, let's go ahead and start, because the book Retire Reset, what you need to know and your financial advisor may not be telling you. It's a new book. It just came out. Why did you write Retire Reset?
You know, I wrote it because after being involved in retirement planning for so many years, literally decades, I felt frustrated that some of the latest research and findings that, American retirement institutes and university professors have discovered and developed and presented over the last few years, which have direct impact on how we design a retirement portfolio, just wasn't getting through to the baby boomers, investors in general, and even, sadly, most of their advisors. And I wanted to present these research findings in a way that could make a difference to people in their lives.
What are some of the biggest roadblocks that you see for people who are making that decision to turn off the paycheck and to retire?
I think one of the biggest issues confronting retirees today, and there are 10,000 a day among the baby boomers who are retiring, if you can believe that, is that once you enter retirement, the rules, the ratios, the challenges we face are not what we have faced as investors up to retirement. And so our retirement portfolios, and my book is really focused on designing the retirement investment portfolio, which we call our nest eggs. The retirement portfolio needs to be revised and redesigned in a way that most of us are not accustomed to. And from my point of view, that is a major roadblock, which is most people don't understand that retirement is about income, and preferably guaranteed income that can last a lifetime or two.
So that is a different mindset. I know people are, when they're younger, they're looking to, like you said, the investment portfolio. They're looking to, how can we make this money grow? But what you're talking about is looking at that nest egg as something that it has to produce income that's going to have to last throughout the rest of their lifetime, really.
That's right. And our lifetimes are getting longer and longer. And someone retiring, a husband and wife retiring at age 65, almost half. One of them is going to get to age 95, and then you're talking about 15 or 20% that will go beyond age 95. And, we've all had clients who have lived into their hundreds. So we're talking about an open-ended time frame which the conventional stock and bond portfolio can't really address reliably. So if we want reliability, we have to look elsewhere to at least complement a traditional or conventional retirement portfolio, which we're all accustomed now to think about in terms of stocks and bonds. There has to be something more.
So when you talk about reliability, what do retirees need to know about the importance of reliability when it comes to income?
Well, look, once those paychecks stop, we have to rely on Social Security or our pension, if we have one, and our nest egg, our personal savings, that personal retirement wealth, it's referred to. And we have to be self-reliant, and we've got to make sure that whether we live to 90 or 95 or 100, or even more important, whether our spouses or significant others, because females, tend to live considerably longer than males, we have got to make sure somehow that the income we need to sustain the lifestyle we aspire to is there, shows up on time. That's not easy.
And one of the things you just mentioned was the life span for females is longer, and so it's not just making a bucket of money last for one person. If you have a significant other, it's making it last for your spouse as well. So it's a bigger math problem. How does inflation play into something like this?
Inflation is a major factor because the cost of living increases 3.8% a year since the end of the Second World War, 2.7% a year over the last 10 years. You know, it depends who's measuring what, and I talk about this in my book to determine what is the inflation rate. We have to preserve purchasing power in retirement. It's one thing to have a $50,000 annual payment from our retirement portfolio, but if inflation is rising and we're not increasing that $50,000 to at least keep up with inflation, it would be great to actually beat inflation, then we're actually losing purchasing power. So we're getting poorer every year. That's a big problem with the traditional immediate annuity, because the immediate annuity, most pay level income, like a pension. Pensions don't increase from year to year. A pension is, in effect, an annuity, but we need annuitized income that can increase efficiently from year to year, because otherwise inflation will hollow out our nest egg.
So you mentioned a couple of things that are very important there, that having that purchasing power that will last, inflation. If you're not making that 3.8%, then you're essentially, you may even be backpedaling there if you're not.
That's precisely right. You're losing ground. To
get you to the level of income there. How does Social Security tie into that? We know we've heard of the COLAs, or cost of living adjustments. Can you talk to us a little bit about where Social Security needs to be on our radar?
Social Security should be a primary consideration. And, you know, when I do my retirement income plans for clients, my first two columns on the left are usually the Social Security benefits that they have coming to them. And by the way, they've purchased those Social Security benefits over the years. They're very important, but there are challenges. The TOLA, the cost of living adjustment factor, in the Social Security benefit structure, in effect, confirms what we're saying, that if you can't keep up with inflation, you're going to be backpedaling and losing ground. So the government recognizes that we have to keep up with inflation. However, our clients for the last few years have seen almost no increase in their cost of living adjustment, because officially, based on how it's measured, the federal government has told us that inflation has been close to zero, no increase. Although our medical premiums for Medicare and whatnot have gone up, I think, 6% a year at the same time. So that's curious. But Social Security is very important. The real challenge we have, and why we can't rely on Social Security primarily, if we don't have to, because we have other savings, is that in 2034 or 35, the Social Security Trust Fund is going to deplete. And at that time, unless government makes some very big changes, we're going to see benefit reductions in Social Security of as much as 25%. That's only 16 years from now. So as much as we'd love to be able to rely on Social Security, we have to factor in realistically that we can't be so sure that the trust fund will be able to meet all of its obligations because it tends to be overpromised and underfunded.
Absolutely. I know. So you mentioned quite a few things there. We started just talking about inflation and the cost of living adjustment, the COLA that's on there. You mentioned that either no increases or the increases that we've had have been offset by the medical premiums going up by a higher rate and so these are all things that come into play when somebody is trying to build a new paycheck and Social Security being a piece of that. But you also talked about other savings. I know in your book you talk about a concept that you call core savings. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Look, my recommendation in my book is that we all need to treat the nest egg differently from our other investment components. And the nest egg, I recommend, should be funded by a stable core portfolio. In other words, the nest egg, unlike other accumulation funds, needs to have a core of stability. And interestingly enough, the latest findings released by professors of retirement income at the American College, Professor Fowl, whom I think you've had on your program.
Yes, that's right.
We've both studied with. Ray Fowl knows his stuff. And back 3 years ago, he reported his findings that, you know what, bonds and bond funds actually are not appropriate for retirement portfolios or nest eggs. Well, that was kind of revolutionary. But it didn't reach the major mainstream media. At the same time, he recommended the use of immediate annuities instead of bonds and bond funds. That was a breakthrough also because he was recommending the inclusion of insurance products in the nest egg. Just last January, Professor Roger Ibbotson, famous for being the authority on the performance of financial assets, stocks, bonds, cash, announced that his newest research showed that the fixed index annuity offers tremendous potential in the years ahead instead of bonds, with much greater stability and much higher performance potential, especially given the fact that the Federal Reserve is looking to raise interest rates. So what we have here is a general consensus among the leading experts that in the retirement portfolio, we need to have annuities and certain types of annuities. The annuity in general provides stability. The fixed index annuity supplies performance potential. And there we have a potential answer to many, if not most, of the challenges that retirement planning presents to us from an investment point of view. And that's why I try to make clear in my book why this is so.
And so this is a major shift in thinking for retirees. We mentioned earlier about accumulation, about investment being something different during those peak earning years and then switching. What other things do retirees need to know when it comes to this stable core?
You're right. It is a major shift in perspective, investment perspective and retirement thinking that I'm calling for, where these innovative annuity contracts actually become the anchor to the retirement portfolio rather than an incidental addition to the retirement portfolio. Now, we are facing today a very uncertain economic and financial future. The latest statistics that we're hearing from the federal government are very promising in terms of wage growth, in terms of unemployment, etc. But the fact of the matter is, when we're planning for our retirements, we have to think 20, 30, 40 years ahead. And we've got to make sure we have that stable core portfolio producing income for us, growing income, for as far as our eyes can see. And therefore, it's extremely important that this change in mindset about the role of insurance in the portfolio needs to be appreciated. Uncertainty is not risk. We know there's market risk out there, and most of us realize we don't want to get stuck in a crashing market. But uncertainty adds a whole other element of a higher degree of risk. And retirees need to recognize that in addition to risk, we're facing uncertainty. We've got a long perspective, time horizon ahead, and we need that stable core.
So that's very important. You mentioned the 20, 30, maybe even 40 years as a time horizon there when you're having to make that money last. Uncertainty being a factor there. Let's shift for a second and talk. This is something you mentioned earlier, but healthcare. If we're living longer. We talked a little bit about Medicare, how the rates have been going up on us, but how does health care play a factor in planning for retirees?
Look, we need to understand, those of us who are in or nearing retirement, that as we age, obviously, our health falters. And we have a huge problem today in our American healthcare system of rising costs. This is why, actually, my approach towards retirement income is very different from, I would say, the conventional approach, which is husband your income, live on as little as you can, put off your Social Security payments, wait till the very last moment so you can maximize them, etc. You know, after many years of doing this, I've come to the conclusion that it's really important to generate more income than you need. And one major reason for that is we're going to have unexpected expenses in the future, many of them medical related or long-term care related. And we actually need to open up the sluices of our Social Security, pension, and our nest egg, principally invested in one of these fixed index annuities, open up the sluices and produce more income than we need so that we can provide and fund other forms of insurance that may be required, like long-term care insurance, and other forms of medical benefits. We should not feel that we have to stint on these other funding requirements we will be facing because we're uncertain about the future of our portfolios.
So that's very important. You mentioned just in general the rising cost, but you said something that I took note of, that it's been your experience, having worked with many people over the years, that having more income than you need is a good way to approach this. You have unexpected expenses that come up. We talked about, long-term care expenses, even just medicine, just paying for prescriptions. These are all things that if you don't have a separate either long-term care or some kind of medical benefit set up for it, it has to come from somewhere. And so it goes into that nest egg, and so this is a reason when you mentioned earlier about having that stable core, about it, the certainty, not having things that are uncertain there, making sure that they're covered. What other? So we've talked about health care. Talked a little bit about Social Security there. What are other things that you want to tell retirees that they need to know about?
You mentioned something very important, which was changing the frame of mind that retirees have when it comes to their retirement planning. Most retirees come to the process from a point of view of not having enough money saved, not having enough income needed, not having enough growth potential or insurance that may be required. It's very important to go into the retirement planning process to define enough. Very important. And what do we need to sustain our consumption, to maintain our desired lifestyles for as long as we live? Then we generate more than we need if we can. That surplus should go towards protecting ourselves, protecting our spouses or significant others, and even providing for legacies for our children and grandchildren if it doesn't get in the way of our sustaining our lifestyles. In retirement, income is king, and cash flow comes first and foremost for us. But when we generate a surplus, we can now give to other people we care about. We can give to charity. And we have a whole different attitude towards retirement. And if that income that we need, that growing income, is guaranteed, then we should go into retirement with an uplifted spirit and an uplifted positive psychology, and that will change our entire retirement experience, rather than being afraid that we're going to run out of money and therefore we spend as little as possible, we give as little as possible. It's much more advisable psychologically and spiritually for us to look at retirement as a time when we assemble all of our income resources and turn them on.
So you mentioned a lot of different things there, but right at the beginning saying to define enough. That's, my experience has been when people come in, there's two big questions you answer. How much do I need? By defining enough, and when can I retire? Starting by defining enough, being able to have more than you need. That's the thing. I've got an asterisk here, because whatever that number is, if you're able to have more than you need, that puts you in a position where you're able to live that retirement lifestyle. You have the cash flow coming in, and if it is up and over, then you can focus on things like leaving a legacy behind. That's going to put you into you said an uplifted spirit, a positive psychology, instead of having that fear that's just kind of like a heavy weight that's on your shoulders. It's always, do we have enough?
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com. Drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.